Hello, welcome to Healing Sessions with Maxie Njuguna. In this podcast, we have an opportunity to connect with you through candid conversations. We are going to have experts coming through to speak to us in matters of healing, matters of trauma, every aspect that we may be going through, and those deep places where we have been wounded, but taking the journey of healing together. Join us in every episode, and please also go ahead and subscribe, like, share, and distribute this content to someone who needs it as we walk through this journey of healing together. Healing Sessions with Maxie Njuguna. Welcome back to Healing Sessions with Maxie Njuguna. And what a journey that we've come this far. I really want to start off by appreciating everyone who has been part of this community and everyone who has taken time to share out this content, to subscribe, and really to join in the amazing conversations that we've been having throughout the episodes. Please go ahead and connect with us. Let me know on the chat box some of the conversations that have meant a lot to you. What kind of guests would you like us to have on the show? And what are the areas and the topics that you would like us to consider as we continue to build this community together? For this series that we are just about to go through, I just really wanted us, before we have another set of guests that will be joining us in a couple of episodes lined up for us, I just thought that we would have a quick time again to just reflect. And this will be part one of this conversation. And then next week, we are going to continue with part two of this conversation. And really just for us to reflect, even as we look at the different events around us that can help us and enhance the healing that we all desire. I had a chance by this last couple of weeks together with a group of people, some from Australia, some from Uganda. We had some from Sierra Leone. We had a membership again from Tanzania, and through and through, we had a chance to visit Rwanda, and they are celebrating 30 years. They call it the Kwibuka. Kwibuka in Kinyarwanda means to remember. It is a season to remember the genocide events that happened in 1994. And so they are celebrating 30 years since that reality happened in that nation. And I just thought that it will be good for us to pick it up as an event for us to learn and reflect in terms of how nations can heal. Because this episode not only speaks to our immediate context, but we have a mandate also to go beyond our context and to speak to other realities that are way beyond where we are. And for this episode, I would like us to consider the reflections that come after 30 years of the genocide that happened in Rwanda. I'm going to share with you a couple of reflections that can guide us, whatever nation you're joining us from, that can be able to inform and inspire change and inspire healing at a national level. Of course, we know that the genocide happened in 1994 in the months of April, and by mid-May, almost 800,000 Tutsis and some moderate Hutus had been killed in the consistent events that happened. And we know that it was a massacre that ensured that neighbors arose against neighbors. Of course, part of it and the history thereof is coming from a time where the Belgians came in to colonize the country, and the separation of powers between the native Hutus and the Tutsis and the Toa groups. And all these ethnic groups were racialized against each other to a point where the Hutu majority had more power in government. And the events that triggered this beginning of the massacre is when the president of Rwanda and Burundi, when the jet was shot down, and that became the beginning of the massacre that we now call the genocide. And roadblocks were placed upon the highways, and the perpetrators would look and check based on your ID. And the trigger events that continued for almost 100 days that led to the death of close to 1 million people in that nation. And so as we remember these events, we can be able to look back and ask each other, what lessons and what reflections can we gather as nations, as people who believe in change, and also to offer space for those who lost their loved ones. Part of the people that we interacted with in the Genocide Memorial Museum are young people, and some of them now in their 30s, and some of them in their mid 30s. These were 1 year olds or 2 year olds when the genocide happened, and you can still see that even physically, some of them still bear the scars of those events. And looking at all those events is a true reality of what happens when we are in war. And the women who were raped, the children who were distorted in many ways, the traumatic experience. Literally, when you go to some of those towns, you can feel that the passage of time has also not cured some of the memories and some of the experiences that people have gone through. And it is a responsibility for us as one kindred, as a brotherhood, and to those who connect with our brothers and sisters in that nation, for us to look at ways by which we can connect with them and partner with them for the sake of the nation going forward. The genocide events, and this is just a quick history for those who may not have details on this, it was very systematic and it was very systemic. It means that the war was embedded in systems because the military was involved, and it was a game of power. Those that could be able to accumulate power and use the different systems in that nation to execute the agenda means that they engaged in a very systemic manner, and the battle was very systematic. There was arranged and pre-planned activities that will ensure that these attacks happened. And of course, we know that this was a division to conquer, to ensure that everyone who is outside of that reality. There were even the 10 commandments that were written against the Tutsis. All this information is in the Memorial Center. And if you have a chance to also go online and check out these details, you'll be able to see how some commandments were written even against the women. That if you married uh, in the opposite tribe, you are considered as one who has deviated away from the tribal lines. And when that time came, women were the biggest group of people who are disadvantaged, and of course, children, because the division thereof was an important agenda to be able to conquer and push on this genocide agenda. So, looking at Rwanda and using it as a template and an opportunity for us to see how nations can heal, I would like to share with us three things that can inspire healing at a national level. This is especially for those of us who care about matters of national interest. Those of us that God has called in the areas of leadership, whatever group of people that we serve, there is a need for us to carry that national heart that can take us to the place where we can heal. When you look at around the nations of the world, when you look at South Africa, you look at Kenya from the post-election violence, you look at Germany, the Holocaust, you look at the uh, slavery trade that happened in North America and all these areas, you'll notice that for every continent, there has been a series of wars. Even in Southern Asia, we had the Korean War that led to a permanent separation between North Korea and South Korea. And all these realities at a national level enable us to reflect and to see and to gather more hope to see the possibility of healing at national level. Number one, I would like to indicate to us that the national healing must be captured in this first reality that the church is a hope, is a center, it is a nerve center that can initiate healing and change at a national level. Any nation that is fighting the church is fighting divine opportunities to heal, because it is in the church where we are able to transform and configure the minds of people to be able to eject every wicked way of living and any way by which altars have been planted that initiate death, so that we can now introduce the life of God. The places that were keen to die now begin to find resurrection power. The church is the hope. Do you realize that the nations that are fighting the church are also decaying in every aspect? You look at their morality index when you consider the matters that pertain to economical growth. When you look at matters of social cohesion and social growth, the emergence of all these sexual distortions, much of these countries is because they have been fighting the agenda of the church. The Antichrist system is an environment that ensures that the church does not go forward, to disqualify the power of a church in a territory. Churchless nations will not be able to stand the full equation to heal and to be transformed. It is possible even to advance economically. You may still be a financial powerhouse, but over time, the indexes that measure the reality of how people live, the morality, in terms of how people connect with one another, you can be surrounded with opulence and you have all these things going on, but the morality is decaying. There is no social connections. The family unit is being destroyed while you are still enjoying an economical boom. So the church, therefore, is the place, it is the caretaker reality of a nation to be able to maintain and preserve the values that push us forward. And therefore, those of us who are in leadership, whatever place that God has given you authority to make policies or to initiate change, carry the consciousness to protect and preserve the church. And there is also a responsibility as well, even for us as a church, to also carry that dignity, to offer a dignified value in society. Because there are some gimmicks and some corner things that we do as a church that disqualify the government to support the integrity of the church. So there is also internal housekeeping that we must also do to ensure that we move forward as a dignified church, that we are not caught in manipulation, we are not caught in all forms of evil that contend against us, that we carry this message of love perpetually in all seasons, and therefore we can have an upper hand to be able to stand and withstand every government that comes. It is what happened to Daniel. Daniel was able to establish himself fully in the government of Babylon. The church is a hope. It is a nerve center for healing. Number two, we must engage the power of culture. If we want to bring healing, we must talk about the dynamics and be able to infiltrate the cultures that we are in. There are two factors that determine cultures. Number one, the language. The language, not just the spoken word, but the language. Language is a definition of meaning, how we bring meaning to people, how meanings are crafted. Number two, literature. Literature is the preservation. It is how culture is preserved, whether in form of books, whether in form of stories, whether in form of experiences, whether in form of events. Even after the event has passed, literature ensures that that event is preserved so that people can connect with it even after many years. So what we have in the memorial in Kigali, for instance, is a literature perspective, not just the books that have been written, but the center thereof, the burial sites that we saw there, including the open graves that are still available for us to visit and connect with the reality of the pain in that nation, give us the literature perspective. And then language is how we prescribe meaning. So some of them will look at the opposite group and say that these people should have no opportunities in our land. And part of that propagation was to ensure that one of the tribes does not find expression in that nation. That is language. It is how you put a meaning. It is expression of a meaning. When you look at this microphone, when you look at this seat, when you look at this studio, there is a meaning attached to it. That is why it is impossible to do this podcast in a noisy place, because a noisy place has an attached meaning to it. The meaning thereof is that it is not a suitable place for us to handle a conversation like this. So we will need to seek for a silent environment that will ensure that the conversation goes forward uninterrupted. It's the power of language. It is how we change culture. Culture is changed by literature and language. We must be careful to know what we are preserving for the generations that will come. What the tokens that we are preserving, the elements and the experiences that we are preserving, should be suitable for hope, for grace, for power, and for healing for those that will come. There are things that should not be propagated to the next generation. That's the literature. There is a sieving away of things that are meaningless. And then we must teach people to attach meaning, profound meaning that is captured in love. Love becomes one of the identities that give meanings to everyone that we connect to. When you see a neighbor who has a different height or skin color different than you, or one who doesn't speak in the same dialect, what meaning do you attach to them? Even for those of us who are in Kenya, what is the meaning that you have attached to people who don't have the same dialect like you are? They didn't come from the same region. Every time you hear their second name, there is an attachment of a meaning that you carry towards them. When we begin to sieve our biases and the manipulations that take us to the place of defeat, and we come with a prescription of love to know that this person is also ordained to be able to bring formation to this nation the same way that I can do it, and together we carry that heart of togetherness and unity, then we have brought a profound attachment of meaning. There are some of us who disqualify others based on where they come from. It means that your language has been distorted. So we deal with culture. And how do we transform culture? Through the preservation of meaningful literature. Anything that is not meaningful should not be propagated, should not be preserved. And two, attaching the right meaning of love and togetherness and every other value that is useful that can take us forward. The power of culture. Number three, it is having an eternal aspiration. Eternal aspiration. If we carry the eternal aspiration, it gives us a vision that never ends. And therefore, we will not fight because of temporary situations. Who is in government for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years will no longer matter, because we are carrying an eternal perspective, a vision that will transcend time. So I'm not just going to zoom into 2 years and fight you because you have a position that is only temporary. We zoom out and we look at the eternal aspirations that we have, a consistent vision that never dies. So no matter what happens in seasons, you see, time has a beginning and an end, but within time we have seasons. Time has a beginning and an end, but within time are seasons. Don't fight in seasons. You just focus on the entire sequence of time. When you look at your life and you see the end, and even into the eternity reality of things for those that believe, you will not be caught up in seasonal matters. The time factor, the longevity of time ensures that you are not caught up in the small realities of confusion. For instance, when you go to your campus to seek for a campus degree, you have the beginning and the end. You have the first semester, which is your first year, and the last semester before you graduate. So that's the beginning, first semester. The end is a semester when you graduate. That's time. But within those 4 years, which is time, we have seasons. We have first year, you have some breaks in between, and those breaks and those different semesters and different classes that we'll take are the seasons within that time. So some of us fight in classes called seasons. And we know, and sometimes we may not even know, that when we fight within those small seasons, we are actually distorting ourselves from the blessing that will come from the time reality. But there's a student who goes in and says that I have an eternal aspiration. I am looking at the end. of the graduation day. So no matter what happens in first year, no matter who hurts me when I'm in second year, no matter what happens in third year, even if I fail in one of the semesters, even if I don't have enough school fees to go forward in the second year or in the third year, I still keep pushing forward because I carry the reality of an eternal aspiration. I am looking at the beginning and the end, and I will not be caught up in the things that come in between. The in between distractions will come in to ensure that we don't get to the fullness of time. And when we get to the fullness of time, then we can be crowned. Those that are crowned at the end of it are those who survived the seasons that come. And for Rwanda, our prayer, and even for East Africa, is that we will look at an eternal vision, an inspiration that will take us in the longevity, in the sequence of long-term matters, so that we are not caught up in small, minute things that derail us from achieving our destiny. This is also true for families. When you started this year, what did God tell you that you must do? So whatever happens in March and April, you have capacity to move through it swiftly because you know there is something that must come upon your life in that specified time. Eternal aspirations are powerful. So these are the reflections from this special visit in Rwanda, healing the nation and seeing how we can heal, is knowing that the church is a hope that we have, knowing that culture is a key ingredient through literature and language, and carrying an eternal aspiration, which is a vision that does not die, and not being caught up in meaningless seasons that push us back. I pray and hope that we will see the possibility of healing at a national level, and we take it to heart for those who are in leadership and for those that have been set in those strategic positions. CEOs, policymakers, members of parliament, those that are in leadership, you have an upper hand and you have an opportunity to showcase these realities. And as we go forward, I know that we will make it through. And in the same regard, I want to appreciate every Rwandan who is still believing, who is still hoping for more. As you celebrate these 30 years in this season, we know that your nation is going forward. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode. We shall continue with part 2 of these conversations, healing the nation. And I know that as we continue to do so, more perspectives will flow upon our lives. Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe, watch, share. Anything that will push this conversation forward, you're welcome to do so. I will see you in the next episode.